In the previous videos, we looked at headers, footers, filters, and some basics about how to set up the data grid. In this video, let's take a look at the toolbar. The toolbar is a React component, and just like other React component, it has a bunch of other child components that are shown or customized on basis of props that you pass in to the grid via the toolbar options property. Some of the child components we've already seen, just like for example, the settings is a child component within the toolbar. So is this filter dropdown. So is the global filter, quick find. All of these things by default sit inside the toolbar. And if you can see here, we have a list of all the different types of components that are inside the toolbar. Um, Structurally, the toolbar has a left component and a right component. It's just a flexbox layout with a space between or something like that. Um, and then you have a whole bunch of properties that you can use to customize the toolbar. Now, for the most part, many of your requirements should be easily met by using some of these properties, but by all means, it's perfectly okay for you to completely swap in your own toolbar. And one of the reasons why we structured the toolbar as a collection of small components is because if you were to make your own toolbar, you can still use some of the child components that the stock toolbar uses. And if you go to the GitHub link on the website, reactdatagrid.com, which is there's a GitHub link under libs, under grid shared, src, lib reference. Here you can see all the source code for all of the, not only just the toolbar, but also the things that sit inside the toolbar. So here it's got, you can see it's got toolbar left, toolbar right. You go in there, look at what's in toolbar left. That's toolbar left, and you can see these are the options that you specify in toolbar options, and they control what happens and which of the child components render in the toolbar. And as you can see, there are many. And you can always go and customize just the left, the right, the whole thing. Even within the left, what you can do is you can specify a toolbar left render, so it will render all the stock components, and then you can render your own extension past the stock components. So very customizable toolbar component. And at the same time, you have the entire source code for the entire toolbar if you choose to customize it. If you look at the demo, there is a example of how we completely took the toolbar and rendered it outside the grid. And this will allow you to totally customize it. In fact, this lets you do like a responsive UI where you can completely restyle the grid on basis of the screen size. So that said, let's take a quick look at some of the options here. Obviously, some of this should be fairly straightforward. Enable global search. Like for example, if you turn that off, it won't show the global search. So let's start toolbar options. If you do that, what it's going to do is this is going to go away. You can do the same thing, enable quick find. You can make that go away. So that will make that go away. So we'll bring that back. By default, they're on, so they're back. Most of these are on by default. You can turn all of them on or off. So let's take a look at some of these other properties. In fact, let's take a look at. So we did this, but let's take a look at this guy. What this is doing is it's allowing you to put a custom component within the toolbar. Oops. And that should be it. And let's take a look at this. This is Hello World. So this, we're able to put a custom button in the toolbar. You can do the same with the right, I think. And that will just put a button here. And you know, you could essentially replace the whole toolbar with your old one thing. So you see, now there's just, the whole thing is gone. It's completely yours to play with. So at a high level, toolbar left, toolbar right, toolbar renderer lets you completely customize the whole thing. And we go over the toolbar right. This kind of talks about the structure of the toolbar. The code of the toolbar is, this may be a little bit old. The latest code should be here, as we pointed out earlier in the video. This is just a custom toolbar that we talked about earlier. The one example I did want to talk about in a little bit more detail is this one, though. So what this one is doing is, it is creating, it's letting you create your own toolbar, but it's also letting you specify, it's also letting you call back into the API of the grid. So let's see how we can do this. So the first thing you want to do is to copy this create node function. I'll talk to you about why we need to do this. So what we're doing here, just before before I get too much into this example, is we are taking something that sits inside the grid, this settings button, and we're gonna render it completely outside. And that presents a couple of challenges, because when something is rendered inside the grid, it has access to the property tree of the grid and the context of the grid that you don't outside. So we are going to have to make a few customizations. Obviously, so since we copied this code from JavaScript, we will need to type it. For the most part, the code in JavaScript that we have in the documentation should have the types commented out, but in certain cases you have to type them in manually. And then, so we brought in the create node, and here are a couple of things that are interesting, and I'll cover this. So what we have here is what's called an API reference. And what happens is, when you initialize a grid, the grid will hand you back a reference to its API. And this API context will let you do a lot of the things with the grid. Setting columns, setting visibility, setting widths, editing, filtering, and a lot of different things. And we'll use these in future videos. But I did want to take this opportunity to introduce you to the concept. And the way we populate this is, first of all, we use a ref. If you're using this in a functional component, we use a ref. And in the event bus, so that's another new concept, is the event bus. This is what gives you a handle into all the events that the grid dispatches. The event bus is going to give you the context. What you do is, on API context ready, you wire it up and you set that up. Now, there's one more caveat here. We're going to do this, and the reason we have to do this is because since on the grid re-render, we want the settings button that depends on the grid to re-render as well, but because we're rendering it completely outside the grid, we want that to re-render. So we kind of set toggle on the parent component, so that triggers a re-render on the whole thing. And again, this is a little bit of an advanced topic. Most people don't need to do this, but I did want to cover it in this video. So then the final step is to really pick this up, which is a yeah, so you want to do it like this. And this basically, because the context is not going to be there the very outset, so you do want to check to ensure the context is there. And once the context is there, you can render a grid component outside the grid. So when I save this, you can see it made that little button outside. And you can use this example as kind of like a springboard to explore how to render the whole thing outside the grid, which we're doing here, and the example source. You can look at it here, how to do that. But basically what this shows you is the entire toolbar is a composable parent component composed of a number of child components that you can independently render either within the toolbar itself or outside the grid. So this gives you a lot of flexibility. And then one final thing that I want to cover before we close out this video is positioning the toolbar. So let me just quickly undo all of this, because we just want to show you how to position the toolbar within the grid, not outside the grid. So let's go back to how we had it before. Let's undo, get rid of this. So now we're back to how we had the toolbar before. So now it's by default, it shows up on the top. What you can do is use this display order property, and this allows you to not just reposition the toolbar, it allows you to reposition pretty much the whole thing. So what you do is just specify a display order, make sure you have the right imports, and once you do that, go back here and you see the toolbar is at the bottom. You can control the position using this array right here. That should be it for this video, and then we can look at some of the more advanced topics in the next one.